Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. This is episode 23 of the load balance playthrough, and today I'm going to tackle plastic. I'm going to utilize the heavy oil residue, diluted packaged fuel, recycled plastic, and recycled rubber alternate recipes. These are a great combination of alternate recipes that save on crude oil and drastically increase the amount of plastic produced. I want to make sure I have enough for the last major factories, so I'll be making enough to completely fill 2 Mark V belts for a total of 1,560 plastic per minute. I'm going to be using this spot here. Let me try to quickly explain the process of what's going on here. So the first step is going to be just like the power plant next door. We're going to take 540 crude oil per minute, turn that all into heavy oil residue with 24 refineries instead of the listed 18. They'll be underclocked to 75%. And the reason for that is I can just connect one pipe to the next step, which is the refineries making the diluted packaged fuel. I'll also need 24 packagers for that packaged water, and that'll give us the 1440 packaged fuel that I need for this. I'll be using the 360 per minute polymer resin in this next step, which is turning that polymer resin into plastic using the residual plastic recipe. We'll then take the plastic and turn it into rubber using the recycled rubber recipe and 1/3 of the fuel that we produced in the first step. Then the final step is taking the rubber and turning it back into plastic utilizing the recycled plastic recipe and the other 2/3 of the fuel we produced. Now the one trick to this whole thing is that the residual plastic recipe does not generate enough for that middle step, making the rubber. So what we'll have to do is take 360 plastic from the final process and cycle it back into the middle step so we can generate enough rubber to get the whole thing up to 100%. Let me run through the blueprints I'll be using. I need 24 refineries making heavy oil residue, so I'll need 12 of this blueprint. I'll need 24 refineries making the diluted packaged fuel, so I'll also need 12 of this blueprint. To package the water, I'll need 12 sets of this blueprint. I need 6 refineries doing the residual plastic recipe, so I'll need 2 of this blueprint. The next step is recycled rubber, so I'll need 16 of those refineries, meaning I need 8 of this blueprint. I'll then need 16 copies of this blueprint to turn that rubber into plastic using the recycled plastic recipe. The refineries using the recycled recipes will need to unpackage that fuel, so I'll be using 24 of this packager blueprint. No tower for this one, however the first half of it is an almost identical setup to this one, so let me go ahead and place that and I'll show you what's different. Now that the fuel is done, let me show you the main difference. And if you're curious about how this got built, I'll put the link to the video of this power plant in the description. We're essentially just not plugging it into a whole bunch of fuel gens, and instead we're making the plastic. The main difference is the way I laid out the packagers for the packaged water. I was able to make really small individual closed loops with these. However, with this, I'll have to merge a lot of them together, split them up, and that sort of a thing. So that's why these ones are a little bit different. Other than that, it's almost an identical setup. So the next step is placing the refineries for the recycled rubber. So let's go ahead and do that. So the reason I have some of these patterns on the floor is it just makes laying all of this easier so that I get the spacing right and I don't have to place a whole bunch of machines and then realize they're one foundation off and have to replace them. The way I want this is actually easier from the other side, I think. There we go. So I want the pipe to be right in the middle of that foundation, and I want this merger to be flush with the line of the biggest foundations. And there's one. I just need to place 7 more. I believe the way I design these is they're supposed to be 4 meters. Perfect. So it'll alternate between being on the split of 2 foundations and being in the middle of 2 foundations. Just like there. Now the next part is going to place the refineries to do the residual plastic. So since I need so few, I'm just going to place them more or less in the middle here. Since each one needs 20 water, in total I need 120, so I can use one water extractor. Now, one trick about water extractors and blueprints, if you did not know this, if I want to place my water extractor, right here, it's way too much. So if I wanted to place it right here, I can tell you right now, it's not going to let me. It's going to say it's not deep enough. And you'd probably be saying, but why? That doesn't make any sense. We're in the middle of the water. And that's true. And the reason for it is it's competing with the blueprints. So if I delete, unfortunately, all 4 of these, I could either make smaller blueprints or I'm just going to fill in the rest of this that still needs to be solid foundation. Now, I can place my water extractor, no problem. And the other trick that I use, but I don't know if I talked about, is I'll put a layer of foundations underneath, and then that way it has the normal kind of 1 meter snapping points instead of being completely freeform, which can be nice, but certain times it's just easier being able to get it to snap to the points you want it to. So I just placed that there to kind of guide it. And there we go. And now to place the last sets of refineries. With those 32 refineries placed, the last blueprints I need to place are the packagers to unpackage the fuel to get all this to work. That should be all of the blueprints I need to place, so now it's time for all of the belt and pipe work. Since the packagers are dealing with 60 in and 60 out, it's fine with Mark 1 belts going in and out of the machines. So that means this one's got to be Mark 2. So that means we've got 120 and 120, so 240. So we've got Mark 3 going into here. And then this is the Mark 4. So this is the fuel coming in, so we're just going to plug this one right up to there. So this third, so I have them grouped together in thirds, is going to feed these, and then these 2/3 will feed those two halves right there. So now I'm just going to mirror this setup for the mergers, and I'll show you how the empty canisters are getting looped back. Okay, so this is our 480. This will be a full Mark IV belt. And the way we're going to get those back into the system is we're just going to set this down here. And then we're actually going to go up 2 more. I'm just going to run it right down here. I guess we should do this part. So now I want those empty canisters to feed into the same packagers so that I can keep each as its own little system. So since these are dealing with 60 empty canisters, turning them into 60 packaged water, this is going to need to be a Mark II, and we're dealing with 2 meters up from the normal, so we're just going to 2, then group these last 2, 2. Perfect. And then I'm just going to use my normal concrete, make things a little bit easier on myself. I'm just going to lay down some temporary ones right here in the middle. Okay, so now let me grab some splitters. And let's see, we're going to have it go right there. So Mark II, Mark II. Lined up? It is. Ah, that's why it looks funny. I forgot. So we need actually to go up 2 more meters, don't we? There we go. And let's do the same on this side. And instead of having the input facing the same way, it's actually going to be reversed. So, actually this needed to be one further back. There we go. So since these are each 120 belts, that means we need Mark III, because that'll be 240 and 240. And then we just need our Mark IV. And we're just going to run this all the way back until we hit that other line. And there we go. And so that completes the loop and gets the empty canisters back into the same water packagers so that they can continually make fuel. Turn that into rubber and plastic. So now we can just delete these temporary foundations. And there we go. So that's basically 1/3 of this, but I'm just going to extend that out to all of these. The only step that's a little bit different is this very first one. So one water extractor clocked to 100% is enough water for all of these. And since each machine requires 60 polymer resin, all of this is fine being Mark I, but this will have to be a Mark III because it needs to be 180 on each of these belts. And so this is where we'll plug in all of the polymer resin. But because I'm going to do the same thing I did with my other plastic and rubber factories, I want to make sure that I can do this in 2 stages. So I'm going to put a small storage container here, and this is where all of the polymer resin that I will combine. Normally I would send it to a sink if it was a power plant, but instead I'm just going to loop that around over here, and it's going to plug in right here. So this is going to be 360 polymer resin, so it's going to need a Mark IV. Now that I'm thinking about it, so I'm going to load balance it because that's kind of what I do now. So to do that, we're going to get Mark IV, so that would be 480, but I only need 360. So that's really easy. All I have to do is loop back a Mark II belt. And because this is a completely full Mark IV belt coming out of the storage container, this will be a full one, so I don't need to do the belt trick where I have 2 different speeds. And then this is where all the polymer resin will come in. And from here, and there we go. And so that's how we'll feed the polymer resin into there. But for now, we can just disconnect that and it'll just fill up with the polymer resin, and then when we're ready, we'll just connect that. So the next step is taking the plastic out of these refineries and sending them to those refineries so we can turn those into rubber. Since each refinery is putting out 20 plastic, that means a group of 3 of these is only putting out 60, so we can go ahead and just use our Mark I belt. And then from here, we can use our Mark II. That's going to need to come down to somewhere around here. So for these, we just need to load balance all of this. So I'm going to just place down some temporary foundations to make my life easier. And with them being a different material, it's really easy to use the filter hotkey and just delete them all afterwards. So okay, so want to split that one there. All right, and then in the very center should be this one. I believe that would be the next spot. Yep. All right, cool. So just work our way backwards. So 30 into each of these, so that means this can be Mark I. So let's just set all of the Mark I belts down. And that means this has to be Mark II. So 120 and 120, so that means this one is our 240. So these are Mark III. And normally it would be Mark IV, but obviously we're only plugging in that 120 belt, and that's not going to be enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to, we're going to place this merger here. So there's our Mark IV. From here, this is where that 120 line is going to plug in. Let's see, where are you? Actually, I can. So there we go. And the reason we have the merger here is just like at the other plastic and rubber factories, we're going to have to take a couple of the machines and we're going to need those to loop back. So since I need this to be a 480 line and I'm only plugging in 120, that means 360 is going to need to get looped back from the final product. So I can go ahead and just run this out, and we'll just go to right here. And with that done, now I can use the filter and just delete the normal concrete, and I don't have to worry about messing up any of the stuff that I've just done. This is a fantastic feature. And there we go. And so that's how that's going to get load balanced. Now I'm basically going to do the same thing, whereas half of these are going to get grouped together and feed this half. The other half will feed this half. And then we'll have those last 6 machines grouped together for the 360 and loop back over there. So let me go ahead and plug all of that up, and I'll give you a quick run through before we get things turned on. Now that that's finished, let me show you. So I got all of the polymer resin belted up together. So real simply just kind of got all of the mergers, and then that line just comes over here, loops around and feeds into that storage container. So we've got this block of refineries grouped together, and that is feeding these packagers for this half of the final step. I went ahead and used the same big frame pillar running down the middle trick as I did over there so that I could run my power right underneath it. I really like being able to use the Mark II and Mark III power connections wherever I can, just because it cuts down on the amount of objects, and I just honestly rarely use them or haven't in the past, and so I'm trying to make good use of them in this playthrough. So as we can see, we've got 3 lines, so all 3 of these right here that are raised up above everything else, these are the empty packages. So the middle one gets split because the middle third is kind of split on both halves of this whole thing. And then the other one just goes down like that. So I like it. It came out really symmetrical, which I'm a big fan of. So like I mentioned, half of these machines get belted over to feed all of these ones. And then with these ones, it's just getting these half. Now, the one thing that I did with this half is all of these get grouped together through this merger, come along on this Mark IV belt, and then I have them going into a smart splitter. So this has the bulk of it going to the right, so that these machines are all prioritized over all the rest of them, essentially. And the reason for that is, like I had mentioned, these last 6 machines are going to get looped back, and this is the line that comes around and plugs into that merger to give this whole section enough plastic. So that way we can ensure that this whole thing gets started up the quickest and most efficient. I then grouped the other 26 refineries into 2 groups of 13, which gives me 2 completely full Mark V belts. So I have 1,560 plastic, all headed to 2 sinks for now. Obviously I've got the train station right there, so it won't be too hard to load balance in whatever amounts that I need and send them off and into a train. The last step before I can turn all of this on is to load up all of the empty canisters. So I'm going to go ahead and fill up the packagers on this end of the process with the empty canisters. I'm then going to fill up these. I'm going to let them completely fill up the belt in between the 2 systems, and then I'm going to top them off with more empty canisters just so I can make sure that there's no issue, won't have any hiccups with fuel or anything like that in the future. So let me go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. And now that the whole system has plenty of empty canisters, it's my favorite part. Time to turn it on and see how long it takes. So since I can just place down a random priority switch anywhere, come over to here, and my plastic West Coast 1500 we'll put in group 7. Let's turn it on and see how long it takes. Looks like our oil extractor is finally completely backed up, so now I can head back over there and plug up the polymer resin. Alright, all we have to do is just connect this lift to this belt and it should all come to life. And there we go. Looks like we've got two completely full Mark V belts. I'm not seeing any gaps. It's kind of what I've been waiting for. And I'm hoping that if I check the power, we should be looking pretty good now. A couple more dips. So let me wait a couple more minutes. Most likely it's the fuel and the heavy oil residue that are still turning off and on, since once those are on steady, then these can kind of stay on. So yeah, we're still stopping and starting. So I'm just gonna wait until they're all showing green and we've got a nice steady power line. And there we have it. So it took a little while, but I'm not too surprised. A big part of it is the fact that there's just so much pipe to fill, and with the fluids in this game, it's just easiest if the pipes are 100% full, in my opinion, for everything to work the smoothest. So it's worth the time. I now have 1,560 plastic per minute headed to the awesome sinks, and that is mission complete. I will need even more rubber than I do plastic, so much that there isn't enough crude oil left here on the west coast. I'll be heading to the Spire Coast to set up a 3,600 per minute rubber factory. Look forward to that, and thanks for watching.